Hi, Colby Sharp here, 5th grade teacher in Michigan. Welcome to my channel where I try to help kids fall in love with reading. One of my favorite ways to do that is by talking about awesome books. That's what we're doing today. Today I'm going to be sharing the books that my students are currently reading here at the end of February of 2022. They are reading some really amazing books. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. And if you click that bell, you'll be notified anytime I share a new video. And we do that all the time, book talks, classroom library stuff, all kinds of fun. So what I did, the kids are at lunch, I asked them to put the book that they're currently reading, because they're going to start independent reading just right after we get back from lunch and recess. And what I have here are the books they're currently reading, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about them, and hopefully we'll find some good titles, maybe some books for you to add to your to-read list. Be sure to let me know down in the comments some of the books that your students are currently reading. Maybe they will be good fits for my kids and the other people watching this video. All right, first up, Aaron Steinke's Mr. Wolf's Class. The new one is coming out, I believe, in April. Really excited. A lot of kids are just finding this series. A lot of kids have made their way through this series, and we're very much eagerly anticipating the new book. Mr. Wolf is a teacher. He's got all these awesome students. It's a really fun class. Aaron does an amazing job. Aaron, who was a classroom teacher for many, many years, definitely gets the school setting and gets the nuances that we find day in and day out in our classrooms. Highly recommend this graphic novel. Oh, I do not highly recommend the pencil bookmark or expo marker bookmark. Come on, 5th graders. Next up, Alone. Definitely the most read novel in verse in my class this year. It has made its way around. We started with one copy. It's pretty beat up and just falling apart. So we got 2 hardcover copies that actually the author Megan Freeman sent us, thank goodness, because these books just keep getting read and read and read. One of my students is actually, oh my gosh, I forgot, she's actually writing. So if you read Alone, the girl is separated from like all of society and they go off. It feels kind of like a concentration camp or internment camp or something awful that they're being taken to by the government. And you spend the time with this girl trying to survive. And one of my students is writing the story of what happens to all the people who are taken away. It's just really a fascinating story. She's a magnificent writer. Next up, Mary Downing Hahn is very popular with this reader and a lot of the readers in my class that like the scary books. This is from our school library. This kind of stuff creeps me out, but the kids love it. So I need to get more of these books in my class. If you know any good scary books, like other than Goosebumps, for like the 5th grade audience, other than Mary's books, let me know down in the comments, because I could add those to my list. Notebook of Doom, great book in the Branches series. This kid is actually kind of creating his own Notebook of Doom, all these different creatures. So he's been reading through these books to get some tips and different sort of things to help him with his writing. That's kind of cool, I think. El Defo, when the show came out on Apple TV? Yeah, Apple TV. I showed them the trailer and the kids were all pretty stoked about it. Many of them hadn't read it in this year's class, so a lot of them have been reading it. And this is a reader who's reading the new Superpowered edition. Okay, great books there. Next up, Alan Gratz's Ground Zero. We're doing a lot of informational writing, and many of the kids in my class, not many, like 3 or 4 are writing about 9/11. So there's been a lot of conversations about those events on September 11th. And so this book is found its way into the hands of a kid after their research on the nonfiction side, which that's really great. And this is such an awesome book, Alan's Ground Zero, if you haven't read it. Highly recommend. Next up, Gary Paulson's book that came out last fall, How to Train Your Dad. Really hilarious look at this child whose dad is pretty unique and pretty different, and him trying to use a dog training book to train his dad to be more normal. Wild River, a lot of my kids read Wildfire. Now some of them are moving on to Rodman's Wild River. I hope there's other wild books, because these are pretty hot commodities here in the 5th grade. New from here, I read this book, I loved it. My daughter read this book and loved it. And now one of my 5th graders is so close to finishing it, and she's really, really digging it. I love talking to her about this book because it's so good. This will be one of the most read books of 2022 by middle grade readers. I really think that. It's awesome. American Chillers, Michigan author Jonathan Rand. He wrote a bunch of books called Michigan Chillers. They're kind of goosebumpy. And then he also wrote a series where he tried to write one for each state called American Chillers. This is The Haunting in New Hampshire. Like, you may not, if you're not from Michigan, you may not have heard of Jonathan Rand, but these books are so popular in Michigan schools. So it might be something you want to check out if your kids are interested in that sort of thing. All right, next up, Jerry Craft's Class Act. Anytime a kid's reading New Kid or Class Act, my heart is happy and full. Such an amazing, powerful, brilliant, important couple of books from the Newbery Medal winning graphic novelist, Jerry Craft. Steve Jenkins, I basically interlibrary or like borrowed from our library, like a collection of our libraries in our area, like all the Steve Jenkins books. So a bunch of kids have been reading those. The kid who wanted them all, he's got 2 left. This one and the Apex Predator book by Steve Jenkins. He's super stoked. So this is the one he's currently reading. Next up, The Knife's Edge. I have the first book in this series, and we were just in the library, and one of my students like, Mr. Sharp, we don't have this one. You need the second book in the series. It's in our library. I'm like, well, actually, I technically don't necessarily need the second book in our series because classroom and school libraries need to work together. So if I have the first book and you get hooked on it, then you go to the library and get the second book. And I can save a few dollars and buy another book to get you hooked to go to the library to get the second book in that series. So that felt good. Towers Falling, when all the kids were really excited sounds bad, interested in 9/11, intrigued by 9/11, curious about 9/11. I checked this book out from the library because I haven't seen my copy all year, so I probably need to repurchase this book. Jewel Parker Rhodes, Towers Falling. The student reading this is about, 79% done. Had a nice little chat with her about it just a little bit ago. Next up, the new illustrated edition of R.J. Palacio's New York Times best-selling book for 10 years, Wonder. The book is illustrated by Tad Carpenter, who did the original cover, and it's really cool. I'm going to show you illustrations. It's got these cool illustrations throughout. Oof. Oh, I'll just turn the page the kids on. Pretty cool. I think it brings a nice little unique, brings the book alive in a new fun, fresh way. It's exciting. So many kids have seen that movie. But still, every week, it's just like number 1, number 2 on the New York Times bestseller list. It's wild, isn't it? Holy smokes. Still only in hardcover. Way to go, Palacio. Creating awesome books. All right, next up, volleyball victory. Jake Maddox got, one for all kinds of sports, but I love it's not just like the super popular sports like football, baseball, basketball, but yes, like swimming and volleyball and lots of other, like even like extremes type sports. So Jake Maddox, modern day Matt Christopher. Kids reading that. Jabba the Puppet. This kid is making their second time through the Origami Yoda series. And yesterday actually showed me their very favorite line that Tom Engelberger has ever written. And it just makes my heart so happy. One of the most underappreciated series today. It was like on fire a few years ago, like 7 years ago maybe. Maybe it still is in classrooms. But I guess people, we talk about online a lot of times the newer books, but this book just keeps on captivating readers. This series just keeps bringing kids to books. I'm so thankful for it. Next up, Out of My Heart, Sharon Draper. Not sure where the jacket is. Many of you read Out of My Mind. I don't know if you read Out of My Heart. We read aloud Out of My Mind. It led to a bunch of kids reading Out of My Heart. Haha, my plan worked. Next up, Wimpy Kid, this 5th grader. I think I talked about him last time. I think he was on the 3rd or the 4th book, but he's reading all of these. He's never read any of these. He made it to the second half of 5th grade, never reading Wimpy Kid. Okay, we had a bit of a broken video there, so hopefully we've deleted enough things on my phone that we can finish this video up. Next up, Alan Gratz's Allies. We were in the library. Kid was reading Ground Zero. Another kid was like, that book looks cool, and so they went and found other books we had by Alan in our school library. Like, I love when these connections are being made. Yes, Starfish, one of my favorite novels in verse. Needs a new sticker for some reason. Of 2021, won a Prince Honor. Absolutely amazing, important, fantastic book. Starfish, so good. Making Friends. We bought this book for my daughter this summer on our trip to Lake Placid, New York, and it made its way to our school library. She loves this series, and my students do as well. Next up, 5 Worlds. Got this from our local library. This is the one book in the series we didn't have in my classroom or school library, so interlibrary loan. I need her to finish it because a couple kids have been reading it, and it's overdue. Gotta take care of that. Next up, one of my favorite historical fiction books of all time, Jennifer Holmes, Our Only May Amelia. Anytime I get a kid to read this book, it makes my heart so stinking happy. It's so good. Oh, it's so good. If you haven't read it, read it. It's so good. And finally, we'll end with another Steve Jenkins book. More kids reading nonfiction than normal. Not a ton, but we'll take it. These are the books that my students are reading. Be sure to let me know down in the comments the books that your kids are reading. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Colby Sharp. I hope you have an awesome, fantastic day.